Well, hello, Energy Rogue subscribers. Welcome back to another weather discussion. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As promised, tonight is another weekly weather discussion, this time as it relates to European weather, as promised back on Tuesday. I want to begin first by thanking each and every one of you for your continued support on the weather content that I've posted. I know I took a little bit of a couple-week hiatus, a little bit of a laggard between the last time we posted some consistent weather discussions, but we are now back on a regular routine. These uploads will be taking place every Tuesday and Thursday throughout the week, and the current outline is that every Tuesday will be particularly focused on the United States, whereas with Thursday video uploads, we will be talking more about European weather, which we are going to tonight. Now, that said, I will also forewarn each and every one of you that unlike the Tuesday video, this one is going to be a lot more long-winded. And tonight we're going to be covering not just European weather, but really just what's going on with European temperatures in terms of the heating and cooling degree days in the United States. I have seen so much discussion in our Discord server over here at Energy Rogue about where's winter. Now, bear in mind, it is Halloween at the time of this recording, and we're not really into winter yet, but the temperatures are way above normal for even this time of year. We're talking about, in the United States, for example, places like the Midwest seeing temperatures into next week, potentially 20 to 25 degrees above normal. I mean, that's a pretty significant change there. But we're going to go over all that here tonight. So we're going to start first with Europe because we have quite a few European friends, and I don't want to neglect you guys, so we'll be talking about that here to start. We'll then dive into the heating and cooling degree day discussion for the United States and where the hell is winter. We're going to talk about that here as well. And as an honorable mention, if we do get around to it, we will also take a quick glimpse at the tropics because while I've seen a lot of discussion about those temperature trends, haven't really seen much in the way of tropical discussion, and I think it's getting forgotten about a little bit, and we'll talk about why we shouldn't forget about our friends in the Gulf of Mexico, because as I've mentioned a couple weeks back, as I predicted, and as I expect, we are not done yet. So, here at first is a glimpse of what is the North Atlantic, and for those of us here that are new, welcome. This product that you're looking at is from the GFS model, and it's the 500 millibar geopotential height. This is really what we refer to as the jet stream. As a meteorologist, I really want to know this particular product. That's the first thing that I always look at before we look at temperatures, because it tells me what the jet stream pattern looks like, what it looks like now, and where we're going. So, this picture says it all, right? So, just in the last 72 hours, this takes us way back to Monday of this week, we had this big upper level ridge just off the western coast of Western Europe, right? And with these ridges, they're typically synonymous with areas of high pressure. And if we know anything about high pressure, that brings some of those warmer conditions. And in a way, this area of high pressure, as you're going to see here on the model in a moment, really acts as a blocking pattern for much of Western Europe to where it keeps this area of the world well above normal in their temperatures too, right? So we're going to look at that here in just a moment. But meanwhile, off towards the west, earlier in the week, we saw this shortwave trough, which is typically associated with an area of low pressure. And because this low pressure is originating from the poles and moving equatorward, that's what we tend to correlate with some of those cooler temperatures. Meanwhile, though, upstream of even that, right near the northeast, if we head out to our folks in the Midwest, here's that pesky upper level ridge. Same thing like we're seeing in Western Europe, also taking shape here in the central United States. We're seeing well above normal temperatures earlier this week. We've seen a bit of a cool down today behind a passing cold front for the central and the south central United States, seeing some temperatures right around the 50s and maybe even mid to high 60s in some spots. But we are expected to warm up yet again as we head into next week. And let's go ahead and take a look at that here. We'll flash forward here to what would be Thursday and now into Friday. Remember how we led off the discussion about that high pressure? Well, look, it is still parked across Western Europe. These temperature normals across places like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, they're going to be also well above normal. We could be seeing temperatures easily 5 to 10 degrees Celsius above their normals for this time of year around November. So this high pressure is expected to pretty much act as this aforementioned blocking pattern, keeping those temperatures pretty mild and even well above normal in several spots across Western and even Central Europe. Meanwhile, out towards the central United States, we talked about it, folks. Look at that upper level ridge returning yet again to the Midwest, even places like the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, extending all the way west towards the south central United States. That is going to be the catalyst for that continuation of warm air. And I should be careful with the term warm, right? I would, again, use the term well above normal. What you can't see off the page, though, is if we head out to our folks in the Four Corner states, the southwestern United States, the Pacific Northwest, especially even the Rockies, this is really the other half of the story, right? While much of the population here in the United States is expected to remain above normal in temperatures, you folks in the Rockies as well as the West Coast are going to be dealing with those below normal temperatures and even a consistent bout of snowfall potential for the Four Corner states, especially along the central and northern Rockies, even particularly true amongst those that are at higher elevations. So that takes us into Sunday. Now, if we continue this forward into what would be next week, we really see more of the same. I mean, again, take a look at Europe here. We are still dealing with height rises, which corresponds to higher pressure. This is more stable air, and thus telling me as a meteorologist that we're not seeing much cold air intrusion at the moment across those parts. Now, out towards the United States, look at that. More of the same. Guess who's getting in on those colder temperatures? Well, in this case, likely to be somewhere in the Central Plains as well as the Central Rockies. But if we go even further than what would essentially be Saturday of next week, those temperatures warm back up yet again. So, folks, we've talked about this here over the last couple of months. If you've been following my forecast, nothing has really surprised me. We were expecting temperatures to be mild on the conservative end. Now, granted, I wasn't forecasting for well above normal, but I certainly was not forecasting for below normal temperatures, at least until the middle of December, and that still remains my forecast. But we were especially saying that for September, October, into November, mild to even some spots, above normal. But really, that trend in the jet pattern we saw on our climate models pretty much correlates to what we're seeing now. The only difference between the forecast that I gave based upon model guidance as well as observations versus what we're seeing now is that rather than this more zonal mild pattern where the jet kind of crosses from west to east, we're seeing more of this meridional pattern. So you got a little trough, and here's your ridge, and here's another trough, and here's another ridge. So this is a constant oscillation of temperature change, especially applicable to the United States. I really can't say the same for Western Europe, and I'll show those temperature anomalies here very shortly. But it's particularly focusing in on the United States and the lower 48, this type of pattern is erratic, right? This is an erratic pattern where 1 minute you're going to be below normal, and then the next minute you're going to warm back up. Below normal, warm back up. As a reminder, something I've talked about before leading up to this video, we are in a transitional period throughout the month of November. We are still transitioning towards La Nina, which is right now at a 60 to 70% chance probability. That has not wavered much. In addition to that, it's also November. We are in a transitionary period climatologically speaking, but also we are transitioning simultaneously to that of our pattern itself going from El Nino to La Nina. So put those two together, a lot of things changing at once. This is the type of pattern you're going to get. So as I said, I can't say the same for Europe. Europe right now, at least in the long term, is an outlier. So we can go ahead and we'll head on over to Europe, for example. We'll continue to use the GFS here just for the sake of conversation, but of course, other models like the European model is also in lockstep with the GFS on a lot of this pattern trend. And to no surprise, because a lot of it is what we can currently observe, and because we are in a progressive pattern, a lot of oscillation for the United States. But as we go through this, right, we can look at Thursday heading into Friday. Guys, you see for the most part that the main population centers of Europe are experiencing well to well above normal temperatures. So I should say above to well above normal temperatures across places like France, Germany, even extending into far northern reaches of Italy. So this is a trend that will continue throughout probably the next couple of weeks. These areas that you see some of these below normal temperatures showing up, look how quickly that erodes, right? You have a little bit of a brief period, likely due to a frontal passage, but outside of that, you warm back up again. And that has a lot to do with that blocking pattern, that area of high pressure that is just going to continue to bring warmth inward onto land from the northern Atlantic and keep these temperatures well above normal. I mean, hell, look at the United Kingdom as we head into what would be next week. I mean, we could be talking about temperatures, again, looking at our Celsius chart here, between 6 to 12 degrees, right? 6 to 12 degrees above normal this time of year. So the European, we can just show you real quick, also has just that. I don't expect there to be much change. And yeah, as I suspected, there really isn't. A lot of the key areas of Western Europe remain above normal during this period. So model confidence is very high. I'm not shocked at all, and we will continue to monitor that going forward. The interesting thing is I personally wonder when this blocking pattern goes away, because it looks to be locked in for quite a while. And the concerning thing for me is, I made my prediction about the United States, and I believe somebody on that same live stream I keep referring to asked about Europe. I don't know if it was you, Tom. I thought it was somebody else. I don't remember you being on that one, but I think my prediction was very similar to that of the United States. I'll have to go back and listen to it and also do a little bit of a deeper dive on the forecast. Because remember, when we talk about Europe weather, I know for us folks here in the U.S., the big thing that we're always concerned about is we're concerned about El Nino and La Nina, right? What's known as the ENSO 3.4. So what's happening in the Pacific? That's what's really important to us. For our friends in Europe, it's good to know that, but if you're looking for a pattern that's more heavily influenced or influencing to the temperature trends in Europe, you want to look no further than the North Atlantic oscillation, the NAO. It's going to be positive or negative, right? That's truly the critical piece there on what happens here in Europe. So a lot of things to watch. What I'm going to do is I will next week be putting out a more extensive video on my winter outlook for Europe. So what I'm thinking of doing is I'm going to be doing next Tuesday a winter outlook / update for the United States. And then I will also put one out on Thursday specifically focusing in on Europe. So I offer my European friends an apology in advance. I know it was advertised we're going to talk about Europe, but because there's a lot going on revolving around both Europe and United States weather here, we're going to focus in on both for tonight's video. But keep in mind, next week will strictly be Europe. It will strictly be the United States on Tuesday, Europe on Thursday. That in mind, let's head on back here to the United States. And so we'll change regions here and just give you a glimpse on what those temperature trends look like. This is just the European model, guys. I mean, look at this. This was Tuesday on the 29th. This would have been a couple days ago. We were forecasting pretty much 12 to 16 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. That certainly happened and verified. And we saw a little bit of a reprieve with that cold front that moved through, and that's being forecasted to continue to progress onward as we head into Friday morning. And then look at that. There's that ridge that shows up again, and we get that warm air. Look at the contrast here. You're well below normal temperatures are across the Rockies, but your warmth is across the central United States and even back towards the eastern half of the United States too. Folks in the mid-Atlantic, the southeast, south-central United States. What a stark contrast here, right? But if we think about it, when we talk in terms of population-weighted degree days, what really matters, right? We could have elevated HDD here that's skewing our total. despite the lower populations, just because the HDD might be higher and more elevated. But ultimately, this area is going to be making the headlines. It's not going to be the cold air affecting the four corner states that people care about. It's going to be the fact that the more populated areas of the U.S. are experiencing well above normal temps. And if we go forward on the European models, we head into Tuesday, look at that. I mean, we could once again be talking about 12 to 16 degrees above normal for the Midwest. We see that cold air continuing for the Rockies, does not go away, and that keeps, again, the central United States warm. Do see a little bit of some cold air seeping in, those Canadian low pressure systems advecting south into the northeast New England. By the time we potentially get to, not this weekend, but the weekend after, that, of course, is very far out, so we'll have to continue to monitor that. But it would make a lot of sense considering the fact that we're seeing a lot of oscillation going on. So here's your trough, there's your ridge and trough, right? So here's your ridge, trough, and so as a result, those upper level ridges are going to advect cold air southward and dislodge it from the poles and bring it down. This all in mind, I've seen a lot of discussion in the Discord, as I mentioned before, and I think the ultimate question that I keep hearing is, where is winter? Where is it? Why are we experiencing such warmth right now? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, again, we are experiencing a transitional period to where, because of that, we have more of this progressive pattern that brings with it large swings in temperature. And they're very inconsistent, right? I would also make the argument, and this is more of my scientific hat, but considering what we've seen on our climatological normals for HDD, CDD, what has already been researched from various institutions about where we're heading with temperatures, over time it's been researched that, especially with some of our longer range, less optimistic climate models that go out 50, 60, 70, 80 years, we are likely to see less CD or HDD and more cooling degree day demand, right? And of course, where that's centered over the next 50 to 60 years, the highest cooling degree demand being here in the Gulf and the South. That is of no surprise to me. I would be shocked by that. But we're seeing this play out in real time. And if you look back, think back to 2020 and 2019. Ever since then, regardless of La Nina or El Nino, we have seen our frequency of heating degree days decrease in many spots across the U.S. That has been a continuing trend just in the last 5 years. As we continue to set records in global temperature, as well as our sea surface temperatures, my prediction long term is this, and I'm not just talking about this season, I'm talking about the next 20, 30, 40 years. The type of pattern that we're seeing today is becoming more and more commonplace. Our weather pattern itself is becoming more erratic. As in, we are seeing consistent temperature swings. We are seeing erratic swings when it comes to flooding versus drought. For example, the Midwest is experiencing widespread drought more frequently, which means more potential for even wildfires out here, and brush fires. We just had one here in Champaign, Illinois. So my whole diatribe here, guys, not to get totally off topic, but this is a trend that I expect to continue. And it's more of a subjective point of view. I don't have any hard science that I can point to that would prove that my theory is correct or my hypothesis. But what I'm observing and what I've been seeing the last several years is the erratic nature of our jet stream pattern. We're seeing less and less of this zonal flow that used to be sprinkled in, and instead, progressive patterns like this are becoming more commonplace, which is exactly what we dealt with last season. The exact same thing. I mean, we had 1 week of winter due to a stratospheric warming event up near the poles. That actually brought down an Arctic blast for a good week and a half, and then it was done. In the long term, I suspect this to be a frequent occurrence. What that means for natural gas, no clue. I think that that's a question left up for Brian and Bill, not to put them on the spot, because, again, my subjective analysis is not necessarily rooted in any scientific publication. I'm sure there's one out there that may kind of hint at what I'm trying to hint at, which I'm happy to research, but my hypothesis remains that in the long term, our winters will become shorter, and this will become the norm. Seeing 60, 70 degree temperatures as your high forecast on Christmas Day in Chicago, was a record 3 years ago, but who knows? Maybe we start to shoot for that more consistently, right? So that's really something to think about for those folks that are long-term traders, because that's something that I am seriously thinking about each and every day. How our weather, how our pattern is becoming so much more inconsistent, and there's volatility in that too. So all that aside, this of course leads to the last topic of tonight, which is the tropics. This same progressive pattern that has been the theme of tonight's discussion is also applicable to our tropical forecasts. So I turn your attention here to that same product we started off tonight's discussion. This is the jet stream map from the GFS. So this, if we bring this back all the way to, we'll call it today, here is that upper level ridge out near the eastern United States tonight. This is expected to move off towards the east and really towards the southeast. As it does so, think about what that means for the tropics. We already have some convection bubbling up here in the Caribbean, right? So if you bring high pressure over, say, to the east of, and actually to the north of Puerto Rico, well, high pressure spins clockwise. That enhances easterly flow, subtle easterly flow across the Caribbean, and that would essentially create an environment conducive for tropical development, demarcated by any one of these X's, that could go pretty much anywhere in the Gulf. I wasn't kidding when I said we're not done. Because with these patterns, if we are progressing high pressure eastward consistently, that leaves plenty of opportunity for a favorable environment for tropical development somewhere within the Caribbean and the Yucatan over the next week or so. And we're already seeing that play out now. If we head on over to our friends over at the National Hurricane Center, they've actually demarcated that area over the next 7 days. Currently looking at a 60% chance of cyclone formation within the next week in that same area. And once again, it's because that once we progress that high pressure off the East Coast the next 24 to 48 hours, that's going to help enhance development in what is already a blob of convection that's trying to get its act together. So that certainly helps it develop, mature, and then eventually move off, shoot the gap, and hit somewhere within the Gulf. Now, in terms of magnitude, what this brings, quite frankly, I'm not so sure. I would say that I am not expecting a major hurricane. Any threshold higher than that, I'm not expecting. I think the Gulf is losing a little bit of gas here, and we are later into the season. That means that historically, as well as what we observe, we're seeing an environment that's not as conducive because a lot of these storms have rolled through. We saw that with Milton. We saw that with Helene. They've used up a lot of that energy in the Gulf, and now we're starting to kind of wind down towards the latter half here of the season. So depending on what happens here, we could see a tropical storm and or hurricane somewhere within the Gulf within the next week or two. But once again, not expecting a major at this time. We'll of course keep you posted on that and any developments that do take place. And as a final note, be sure to check out wxrogue.com for your one-stop shop as it relates to those temperature forecasts, especially for heating and cooling degree days. These weather products are specifically geared towards the energy and nat gas space. You'll find a lot of these very useful. We talk about population-weighted heating degree days, not just from the GFS, but various models. We have here the North American model down in our premium section. You can look at the more short-term trends. And if you're more interested in the longer-term trends of the next week or two, you can head on over to the GFS product that's labeled here on the left. We also do have total degree days as part of our product suite. So not just heating and cooling, but also population-weighted and total degree days as well. And we can't forget about gas-weighted degree days. I actually do have to update these because there are some new metrics that we have to add in, because remember, our gas weights are constantly changing quite frequently. So we're going to go ahead and make those updates here over in the next few days or so. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday and have an awesome, safe, and healthy rest of your weekend. We will be back here on Tuesday with our winter weather forecast update for the United States, and then Thursday for the countries that reside in Europe for your winter weather outlook as well. Of course, we'll also be tracking and monitoring the latest with the tropics, so if something does come up, I will be posting a video likely before then to get you guys into kind of the loop of what's going on with any tropical developments that do occur. Thank you so much as always for tuning in and your feedback, and we'll be talking very soon. Take care.